الرحمة في الدين والدنيا, pouring with so much guidance, blessings, and safety. Continuing on reflections on sections of the dua of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, known as dua al-Sabah. We started from the beginning of the dua and we're up to the part Ya man ya'lam wa ya'lamu bima kana qabla an yakun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows of everything, and this section regarding the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He knows of it before it happens. Kana is was, and yakun is or to happen in the future. Before anything happens, he knows of it. For him it is can. And in fact, this statement is not referring to the past, kana being in the past. It is not referring to it being in the past. Rather, the Imam is saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for him, kana and yakun is irrelevant. Again, when we come to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya man dalla ala dhatihi bidhatih wa tanazzaha an mujanasati makhluqatih, he guides us to his essence through himself, and this is the highest level of knowing him, where we do not need barahin, we do not need proofs. متى غبت حتى تحتاج إلى دليل. Imam Hussein alayhi salam in Dua Arafah, he says, when were you absent to need, so that you need a proof for us to basically be guided to you through it. You don't need a dalil from your makhluqat. All of these things are what you have created, and we don't need a proof to you through your creation. You are there. Mata ghibt, that's the beautiful statement of the Imam. When were you not there? When were you absent? In other words, if our hearts were clear and vision was clean, we would not need all of these barahin. Barahin are for perhaps children in the realm of the spiritual journey, children who do not have much understanding, not speaking of the children in age. Otherwise, there were young ones, including Ahlul Bayt, obviously at the peak of that, were very young, yet very sharp vision. And there are many old in age, but they are children still in their spiritual journey, that they need proofs, and even then they deny many of the proofs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, وَعَلِمَ بِمَا كَانَ قَبْلَ أَن يَكُونَ, knowing, basically understanding the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that when it comes to his essence, time and place have no effect, basically. He is not limited to a time, he is not limited to a space or a place. We cannot ask those questions, kayfa wa aina. These things apply to creatures that he has created, limited creatures that he has created. Time applies to limited creatures that he has created. Therefore, in his realm, kana and yakun doesn't make sense. In fact, if we understand that, then the question of the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes clear. And his knowledge versus our free will, it also becomes very clear. Many people, when it comes to the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they suggest that since he knows what's going to happen, therefore I have no choice. I cannot change what is going to happen. He knows that it's going to happen, therefore I cannot change it. In other words, we are not free to choose for ourselves. Then the question arises, why would he then reward and punish? He knows that the muhsin is going to do ihsan and the musi is going to do isa'ah. He knows the good doers is going to do good deeds, and the sinner is going to sin. Therefore, they cannot change that for themselves. That is the suggestion. I'm not suggesting that. This is a suggestion by some who did not understand the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our free will and how it works, how if there's a contradiction between them. And the answer to those people is that you have failed to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are limiting him to a time, and you are putting him in the time frame that we are in. And therefore, his knowledge of something before it occurs makes no sense to you, because, or you have to justify it by saying there's no justice, this concept of adala. And that's why in the school of Ahlul Bayt, we make sure that we speak of the adala of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as one of the principles, one of usul al-din. All of his attributes are part of usul al-din. Part of Tawheed is to believe in his attributes, and that his attributes are part of his essence. We emphasize on adala because there were people who did not understand certain basic principles, and therefore they questioned the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can he be just, yet he sends people to hell and heaven based on things that he made them do according to these people? They could not understand his knowledge versus free will. They could not understand the qada and qadar, destiny versus free will. Unless you learn from the source of knowledge from Ahlul Bayt salawatullah wa salamu alayhim, people will fall in either extremes, either become mujabbara or complete tafweed, mufawwida. Ahlul Bayt teach us the middle path. Here, when it comes to the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is not in the time frame that we're in. Therefore, his knowledge of it is obvious. He knows of, in fact, everything. Back to the Tawheed that we were discussing. Everything is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything belongs to him. Everything is from him and originates from him and goes back to him. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. He knows how, there is, when we, in fact, our ulama, our scholars, when they speak of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his essence, they say there's no way there could be tarkib. It's not, he is not a complicated thing that you would say he is made of many parts. والعياذ بالله. من جزأه, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah wa salamu alayhi in Nahj al-Balagha, he says you cannot think of God to be separate things, different things. He is one. His essence, attribute, everything is one. If he is basit, we say simple, he is not sophisticated, he is not murakkab, he is not made of different articles, wal-ayadu billah. If that is the case, and since that he is not murakkab, therefore there's no way there would be any ignorance of him, of himself. And everything is from him, therefore he knows everything. There is no question about that. There should be no doubt about that. And this is what the Imam is referring to when he says alima bima kana qabla an yakun, referring to his ilm, and kana and yakun becomes one. وعلم بما كان قبل أن يكون يا من أرقدني في مهاد أمنه وأمانه. Or the one, this is a beautiful part of the dua. In fact, every part of the dua is beautiful, and there is the saja, or the repeated rhyming, and the short sentences that are rhyming, and there's a use of a lot of the balagha in the Arabic language, or the rules of eloquence, very, very much used in this dua by Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. If one focuses, interestingly, this is something that we can reflect on. If one focuses on beautifying the words, the appearance of the words, it is hard to then get the meaning, the deep meanings that one wants to share. And if one focuses on the deep meanings, on the depth of the meanings and the depth of the concepts, then it is hard to put it in, the beautifying the words and focusing on the eloquence and the rhymes and so on. The Imam salawatullah wasalamu alayhi combines the two extremes, in fact. The best in both, in both angles. The best with no doubt. Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah wasalamu alayhi displays it. And as he speaks of the extremes in terms of describing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his creation, in fact, including the statements before we says يا من قرب من خطرات الظنون وبعد عن لحظات العيون. On the one hand he is near, on the other hand he is far. Near when it comes to the mind, to the thoughts, to the heart, and far when it comes to the obviously vision, to the physical vision. لحظات العيون. Physical vision cannot see him, and not far in the distance, in the sense of him being close or far distance wise. In fact, this brings up another thing, which is regarding those who claim that we can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here or in the day of judgment. Some suggest, in fact, the Wahhabi school and the school of Ibn Taymiyyah, that he can be seen on the day of judgment and that he descends on Thursday night from the heavens, taking one step, one heaven at a time. Each heaven becomes like a step, and he takes all of those nonsense sense concepts that are suggested. They cannot understand, obviously, the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he says to us in the Holy Quran that he is closer to us than our jugular vein. أقرب إلي من حبل الوريد. He is closer to us. And if that is how he is, the question for those people is that when we come to see him, does he depart from us if he's closer to us? Does he have to move away from us in order for us to see him? How does it work? Obviously, the closeness is not a physical closeness, and the being far is not a physical distance. This is what Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying. يا من قرب من خطرات الظنون وبعد عن لحظات العيون وعلم بما كان قبل أن يكون يا من أرقدني في مهاد أمنه وأمانه. Or the one who makes me rest. Ruqud is also the sleeping. Or the one who puts me to rest, puts me to sleep in a cradle. Mihad is like a cradle, a place of sleep. In the cradle or in the bosom, you could say. Mihad is also when the mother could make that with her own arms. Or the one who puts me to rest and to sleep and to have that peace in the cradle of his safety, amnihi wa amani, safety or security, and aman, that there is no fear. Now, one may be fearful before they fall asleep, but think about this. We may have so many negative thoughts. We may be very worried and so on prior to sleeping. As soon as we fall asleep, when we, in fact, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, that He is the one that takes the anfus during sleep. He is the one who holds our souls. And those who are meant to live longer, then when it comes to the morning or to the time that He wakes us up, He gives the soul back. And those who are decreed to depart completely, to die, their souls stay. الله يتوفى الأنفس حين مماتها والتي لم تمت في منامها. He takes it فيرسل, then He sends back the one who is meant to live. He is the one who's holding the soul. And when we do actually fall asleep, then all the the peace, the refreshment of the mind. That's why in the morning, and this Good Morning Quran program is a great opportunity. In the morning, the mind is fresh, the mind is clear. Best time for studying, best time for gaining knowledge, best time for reflecting is this the time after one wakes up from that sleep that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided for us. Ya man arqadani. He is the one who puts us in that mode, in the sleeping mode, in the resting mode, in the peaceful mode that He puts us in. Ya man arqadani. He Himself is doing it. في مهاد أمنه وأمانه. In His sacred safety and security. Nothing that I can prepare for myself, nothing that I have decided. In fact, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, when they responded to the atheists and those who question resurrection, he says, "Can you withhold sleep, or can you withhold awakening? You know, when you sleep, can you decide that I don't want to wake up? Is it in your control?" Is it in our control that we sleep, or is it in our control? Yes, you may say, okay, I can prolong it, but comes a time that you cannot, and you go to sleep. Now, when we do go to sleep, is it in our control? Can I decide that, okay, I'm going to wake up at 5 minutes after I fall asleep? You know, we can make efforts. Certain people try to have riyada, the spiritual exercise, in order to have control a lot, better control over many things. But ultimately, it is in His hands. And when it comes the time to wake up, also in His hand. يا من أرقدني في مهاد أمنه وأمانه وأيقظني إلى ما منحني. He is the one who wakes us up. He is the one who brings that awakening state back to us. وأيقظني إلى ما منحني به من مننه وإحسانه, to what He has given me, what He has gifted me in terms of His favors and His goodness. Now the question here is, while we are asleep, and I want you all to reflect on this. While we are asleep, during the time that we're asleep, is His minan and ihsan, are His favors and His goodness, are they absent or are they continuous? If we're speaking of the physical aspects or physical favors, in terms of being able to breathe, being able to sleep safely, securely, being able to, in fact, have the warmth, all of the things. Think of all the mercy and all the blessings that are there during the time of sleep. Therefore, minan and ihsan are there. What is then the Imam referring to when he says وَأَيْقَظَنِي إِلَى مَا مَنَحَنِي بِهِ مِن مِنَنِهِ وَإِحْسَانِهِ? What the Imam is referring to here is not the what was not there during what was already there during sleep. This is another level of minan and ihsan, and perhaps it is none but guidance, that He wakes me up to recognize when I'm asleep. And this is when we are, if we reflect on this, we realize that the Imam is using the sleeping time as the awakening, and using that analogy to the mind being asleep versus being awake. I am not awake if I am not seeing the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَيْقَظَنِي إِلَى مَا مَنَحَنِي بِهِ مِن مِنَنِهِ وَإِحْسَانِهِ. He woke me up to recognize. And Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen in another place, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, he says, الناس نيام فإذا ما تنتبه. People are asleep It is when they die that they wake up. What is he referring to? He also, in another place, he says, die before you die. Mutu qabla an tamutu. In other words, wake up before the time of death. Generally, people are asleep, and when they die, they wake up. That's when they see the reality. فكشفنا عنك غطاءك فبصرك اليوم حديد. It happens that we removed your veil, as the Quran says, we removed the veil from you. Therefore, now you see sharp. Very, your vision is very sharp. You see things clearly now. When we die, we see things clearly. We see the reality of certain things that we did not see. Good deeds, we see the reality of it. Evil acts, we see the reality of it. Yes, in dunya, زَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالَهُم. Shaitan makes us think of certain things to be beautiful, to be fun, when in actual reality, it's nothing but a very disgraceful situation. That we see that sinful acts are disgraceful. We see that when we depart. However, when we're in this dunya, many of us are asleep. We are unaware, we are asleep. The Imam here is saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who guides us. He is Nuru Samawati wal Ard. He is the guide, He is the light, that He wakes us up. Here, when we wake up, the daytime, we see things clear. When we wake up in a spiritual sense, we see the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we recognize His favors upon us. In the dua, we read that you are the ones who nourished me. ربيتني في نعمك وإحسانك صغيرا ونوهت باسمي كبيرا. You are the one who favored me from being a child, having the caring, loving mother and father, having people around me. عطفت علي قلوب الحواضن. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and again Dua Arafah, he says, you favored me by granting me parents or guardians who have soft hearts towards me. All of these things, we start recognizing them. We start recognizing it. That state of awakening, that being spiritually awake, is recognizing all the minan, the favors and the goodness and the kindness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَيْقَظَنِي إِلَى مَا مَنَحَنِي بِهِ مِن مِنَنِهِ وَإِحْسَانِهِ. That is the real awakening. The real awakening, yes, the relationship is there because it is morning time. We were asleep, and the Imam says, you put us in the sleep of in your safety and security, and you wake us up to your favors. The favors on a physical sense were already there while we're asleep. So that waking up is in reality is the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us recognize His favors and His kindness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us a state of yaqadah, a state of awakening, and keep us away from a state of ghafla, a state of ignorance, and being in the slumber and the sleep of ignorance. Wal billah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa